getting the most out of your forms. And I'm super excited to welcome Audrey, Customer Success Manager, and Megan, another Customer Success Manager, who will be taking you through this topics going forwards. And the agenda for today is going to be, if you can skip on one, Audrey, thank you. So Audrey and Megan are going to take you through what the mobile intake forms look like, the benefits, the types of forms that you can use, how we can send forms back to the EHR, and how we're going to implement this. Also taking you through the CCDA reconciliation process, and what some of the things we can do there, some of the things we can't. And then Megan's going to be finishing off with a demo. And if you do have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll ask those at the end of the session. And again, as you probably saw, the call is getting recorded, so we can send this back out to you after the session. But I'm going to hand over the reins to Audrey right now. Yeah, thanks, Audrey.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Nathan, for the introduction. As Nathan had mentioned, my name is Audrey, and I'm one of the customer success managers here at Luma Health. And we're super excited to be talking to you about mobile intake forms, CCDA forms, and really how to get the most out of using forms here at Luma Health. So some of you may ask, what are forms? Some of you guys may already be using forms today. So we'll be talking about both use cases. But for those who are just getting started, we have a form system called Mobile Patient Intake Forms, which are customizable forms that patients can complete prior to coming in for their appointment. Patients will have the option to be able to include things such as their insurance card information, thus minimizing any work needed to complete this information when they actually come in to their appointment. So minimizing staff and patient workflow. In terms of use cases, we can use forms for things like pre-qualification questionnaires, screening forms, HIPAA compliance, release information, and post-procedure surveys. So if you have forms that you're already using in your clinics, we can digitize those forms and send those out to patients. On the right-hand side over here is what patients will be prompted to fill out when they first sign in for completing the form. So they'll be asked to sign in their first name, their last name, contact information, and then they'd be prompted to move forward with the form. So some of the benefits of using forms are it really saves time in terms of gathering that information process. You'll be able to gather that information prior to the patient coming into the appointment, and they can fill it out really on their own time on their own mobile devices. They can include in their insurance contact information. They can include in other things that they might need to upload into those forms. And then your doctors and clinics will be able to have more time to prepare and engage for those upcoming appointments. The patient will then get directed to the right doctor if they're filling out a pre-qualification form, and this will allow them to schedule the appointment at the correct with the correct facility in the correct provider. So I wanted to introduce the three most common types of forms at Luma Health. The first one is our pre-scheduling form, and you can use pre-scheduling form to gather any information for a new patient prior to them coming into the appointment. Patients don't need to log into a patient application. All they'll need to be able to do is include their first name, last name, and date of birth to have access to this form. These forms are tokenized, meaning that they're patient-specific. And for any patients that are completing this form for the first time and therefore the patient is not already in your EHR, Luma Health can create an alias for this patient as a patient holder and until your staff get that information, and then they can create a new patient profile in your EHR. For existing patients, this form is automatically linked to the existing patient, and you can find this information in your file management section. Um, Once a patient has completed that information for pre-scheduling, they'll be prompted to select a prompted to select a provider and appointment time that would meet their needs, and then they can go forward with scheduling their appointment. Next, we have intake forms. So intake forms are similar to pre-scheduling forms, but they will not prompt a patient to actually schedule an appointment at the very end. This is really for being able to take information for new patients or for screening information, such as like a HIPAA compliance or COVID screening form. This information is collected for the patient prior to their appointment or procedure, and you can then link that into their patient profile. And then finally, we have a form called CCDA, which is Consolidated Clinical Documentation Architecture, which could be sent back to your EHR. This is through a feature through Luma using something called our Direct Trust, which is a secure email transfer to send your form from your Luma profile to your EHR. You can build these CCDA forms just as you would with an intake form. And these can be used for either intake forms or patient symptom questionnaires. So how do you send these forms to a patient? So these forms can be sent to patients through embedded appointment reminders. So after a patient is confirmed their appointment, you can send it to a patient directly. You could send these forms ad hoc through a secure chat, a broadcast, or a custom action. Pro tip, you can also stylize these forms based off of your branding. And for more information about that, you can go into styling and you can configure the form to match the color and the have the logo as well to fit your customized styling for your intake forms. And then finally, how does CCDA work? So CCDA takes that information that a patient fills out and would allow you to be able to send that information back to your EHR through a P2P secure email. Staff can then find that form either reconciled into specific fields for specific EHRs, or it would be sent as a PDF form and saved via your Direct Trust email. So CCDA, in order to be able to use CCDA, you must be a member of your Direct Trust. And Direct Trust is an organization that ensures secure email exchange. So in order to be a member of Direct Trust, contact your EHR representative for more details and they can help you get started. So from here, I'm going to pass it on to Megan to give you an example of how to build your forms and then show you where those forms are stored.
All right, thank you so much, Audrey. So let me actually take a step back here. So when you guys are logging into Luma, you guys, I'm pretty sure, are probably familiar at this point. This is the screen you're going to receive. But where you need to go to actually get to the forms and be able to build or even update is going to be within Mission Control. So upper right-hand corner, you just hit the little drop down, you pop over into Mission Control. Now, one of the things I will say in terms of user access to be able to create or update a form, you will need to have that admin access. So if you do not have that access or you want to provide that to someone, just let your customer success manager know and we can get that over to you. So in terms of getting to the form builder, you're going to go over to utilities here on the left-hand side. You'll see I'm given a little drop down here and you want to actually hit form builder. You can see here also on my main page, because I've been to this recently, it will also pop up here as well. So if this is a place that you're going in and out of, it'll pop up and you can easily click on this as well. You'll see here there is a little kind of update or post here that lets you know we are actually making some improvements to the form builder. So if you wanted to check that out, you're more than welcome to. But for now, since that is still something that is in the works, I'll just do the demo in terms of how things are currently laid out with the builder. So you can see here, if you do already have forms in your account, they will be listed here. The great thing about the forms, and especially building out a brand new one, is that it is really difficult to mess anything up. So unless you're going into a form that is currently active, it is one that's being sent out to patients, maybe via the reminders, as Audrey had mentioned. You can't mess the form up in terms of building a new one out. So it's a great thing about this. I know once I kind of show you how to build it, it is a little overwhelming. But we definitely say get in here, play around with it as much as possible to get a feel for it and to really understand kind of the look and feel of things, because you really can't mess anything up. So in terms of creating a form, what you'll do, you see over here in the right-hand corner, that create form button. You go ahead and select it here and you'll see you get this pop up. So you got form templates. We highly, highly recommend using these templates. These are here to make your lives easier. It actually cuts down on quite a bit of time because some forms we know can be incredibly lengthy. So having these templates to really start from and kind of go off of will make your life a lot easier. So I'm just going to do an intake form here. You can see we've already got one started. You can see some of the other samples or templates that we have here. You'll notice we do have that CCDA starter template down here as well. Like I said, I'm just going to start with this intake form. So you just simply hit this use template button and it's going to pop you over into the form. So you can see here some of the important things to really pay attention to. Form name, I mean, you think, this should be relatively easy. Just note, because these do live in the account and there maybe are multiple people that have access or are making updates or changes or creating forms, try to be as specific as possible in this name. So that way you know exactly what it's for. So that way when it does need to go out to patients, either via reminder or if you're going to send it manually, you'll know exactly what form you need. You can see here form status. It automatically pops up active. What this really means is, can this form be used? So is this form ready to be sent out to patients? I typically leave these inactive. You can uncheck it if it makes you feel more comfortable there. But in terms of it going out to patients, unless it's already set up to go out automatically via some type of reminder, it's not going to. And as long as no one copies the squiggly that I'll show you here shortly and sends it to a patient, it's also not going to go out anywhere. So it can live in an active status. Again, as long as it doesn't meet those two criteria I just went over, it's not going to go out to any patients. I'm going to skip over this portion just for right now. I will come back to it, but I'm going to skip over it. You'll see here some other options before you start building. You can ask for insurance information up front if you'd like to do that. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and leave it out. But also note that if you do select this, it is a hard stop, meaning if the patient doesn't want to provide a copy, it's a picture. We ask them, to scan the front and back of their card. If they don't want to do that, they're not going to be able to continue on with the form. So you don't have to ask this up front. You can add it into the form itself, but just know if it is at the beginning, they won't actually be able to complete the rest of it until they do that piece. You can also select here, if the form hasn't been completed, it'll send a reminder to the patient to go ahead and do so, or to go ahead back in and continue filling out where they left off. We don't recommend this, but you are able, if you wanted to make all the questions required. The only time we'd really say to go ahead and do that is if you're looking for some kind of consent form and you do need to, maybe you only have a couple questions and you need to have both or the multiple questions answered. You can make all of those required fields. But for the most part, we say don't include this, but I will show you how to make other questions within the forms required as need be. One of the most important pieces here is selecting the type of form. So as Audrey had mentioned, we have those pre-scheduling forms. Think of that as like online scheduling. So really a separate piece here. Typically, you probably won't ever be using this. A lot of times your customer success manager or our support team will be handling those types of forms just because they tend to be a little bit more complicated. So intake here or feedback or CCDA. Again, I'll skip that CCDA for just now, but I'll get back to it. So make sure you're choosing the correct form. And also a big thing to note here, make sure when you're selecting this that it is correct, because after I select this and I've started to create my form and I save it, if I come back in here and I realize, oh shoot, I chose the wrong one, I need to change it, is going to clear everything out. So just be kind of aware when you're selecting, make sure you've got the right one, so that way you don't have to start over from scratch. All right, so here you can see where our template is coming in. This is going to be kind of that first thing that the patient sees when they get the form. You can customize this to say really whatever you'd like for it to say. We say, typically leave it kind of short and sweet. So that way the patient can just jump right into answering the questions. This here also, if there's anything additional you wanted to say to the patient, you could put it here as well. The action then obviously is to start the form. So you can see from here, we have what we call grouped questions. So you can see this is going to be that patient information. So typically this is always going to be at the top part of the form if you're actually filling one out manually. And the way to do this, so that way it really reduces down on the clicks that the patient's going to have to make once they're in the form, is to group the questions. So if you pop over here, you see these little arrows. You can click on that, or sorry, I should say plus sign. You can click on that and you can see there are a ton of different types of questions that you can select from. So right now, this very first one is called a question group. So what a question group does, like I was just saying, is it puts everything into what we call one question. So that way the patients, when they are seeing this page or viewing this, either on their mobile device or if it happens to be through email, they're seeing all of this on one page. So they can quickly go through, input their information, and then move on to the next question. Now, as I had mentioned earlier, there are ways to make, if you want to, required fields. So you can see over here these little checks. So obviously we're going to need that patient's first name, last name, that basic information to know who they are. So of course we want to make those required fields. But that's how you would go through and determine what you would or wouldn't want to be required. Just simply checking there. You can see there's some other information over here in terms of item settings, inserting squigglies. Typically, I would say with the insert squiggly, if you're familiar with what the squigglies are here at Luma, typically we don't find these within the forms. It's not to say that you can't use them, but really there hasn't been, like, I'll show you real quick. So there's first name, last name, cell phone number. So again, if you're familiar with the squigglies, this is really a way to pull in information directly. But because this is a form and you're not necessarily knowing who this is going to go to, we typically don't add the squigglies in here. But it is there if there is a case where it does make sense to use these. And part of the item settings, so let me go up here. So you can see here for this type of question, we don't have a lot in terms of the settings. You do see in terms of visibility, what this means here. So when this form, after the patient does fill it out and the form comes back into Luma, what you guys want to be able to see on your end. So do you want to be able to see this information that's asked in this question set? Do you want to be able to see it? Of course you do. So default visibility here is what you're going to want to leave it at. If for some reason there's a question you ask, maybe it's not super important, may not be a required question. If you want to exclude from seeing that information when you're pulling that form back up within Luma, then you can go ahead and exclude it. You can also, if you wanted to delete anything out, so since this is a template, maybe we're asking a little bit more than what you would, or maybe we're not asking enough. So in this, if there's something within this patient information part in terms of like basic demographics, is there something that you would normally ask that we don't have listed? You can see here, these are all my questions in this grouping. I can go ahead and add another question. I can choose what type of question I want that to be. So if I want just like a little short text answer, I could choose that. If it's going to be a little bit longer text, as you can see, if I choose email, which is up here already, that's going to, prompt them to put their email address in there. If you need a date for whatever reason within this field, you could put that date. Really kind of anything that makes sense here is what you can add. And as you can see, as I go down, you'll have the different choices for what you want to select for each of the questions. You can see medication here. So when the patient is actually filling out this form, they can go ahead and if they take Advil, they can go ahead and put that in, and we'd actually search and be able to pull that up so that they can easily select that. One of the things you'll notice here, and I know this can be a little scary because it is like, what is happening? But you'll see this where it says jump. So if you've ever talked with any of us about forms before, you may have heard us talk about jump logic. There's a couple of ways to use jump logic in our forms. One of the ways is to simply add it over here. Down here, you can see this is an option. So we see here that this previous question was about insurance. So if the question is, does the patient have insurance? And maybe they select no. We obviously don't need to capture anything else in terms of their insurance since they do not have any. So this is included here, basically letting you know that what's going to happen next is the patient selects no, it's actually going to skip this next question and continue on to the next one. So I know this can be a little confusing. One of the ways that you can also do jump logic, let me go right in here to this configure redirect. You can select that. And you'll see here, you're given a couple different options. The one you'd want to pick here is jump to a different item. So back to this example, if I know, nope, this patient does not have insurance, we want them to skip this upload insurance card piece. I could go ahead, do my configure, jump to a different item, and it's actually going to give me the different questions that are already here, which one I would want to jump to. So I would just go ahead and select that I wanted it to jump to this one, and then I could go ahead, close that, and it would know to go ahead and jump. You'll see here again, different groupings in terms of it's kind of a demographics question just in general. Those are all grouped together. Reason for visit, here's the medications question. And then this is the consent for treatment. So one of the great things here is you can add the e-signature, which is fantastic. So that way the patient can obviously just type in their first and last name and it's signed. One of the other things that I did want to mention, so in terms of, and let me find the question, in terms of the insurance piece and asking for that. So you can see here, when I click back on this again, the question that was selected or the type of question is this insurance card. So you see it almost looks like a little picture. This means that we're going to ask the patient to take a picture of the front and back. So kind of like at the very beginning when we were choosing if we wanted to ask the patient for that information up front, that's going to be the same type of question. You can ask for the information just in like a short answer question and have them type it in. Really up to you. Since we are a text first platform, we're obviously hoping that the majority of patients are going to be filling this out on their phone. Should they not, they still actually will be prompted to add there, as long as you're using the capture question type, they will still be asked to take a picture of that. So let me show you real quick. This was a test I had done. This is me, I have to, because I'm in here a lot, it's already pre-populated, but this would be me putting in my first name, last name, my date of birth, just verifying it's myself. And in this flow here, you'll see this would be like the staff sending this form directly to me. Of course, you'd probably add a little more text here of saying, hey, could you go ahead and fill this form out for us before your appointment? So I will go ahead and click on that. And then as the patient, this is what I'm going to see here. So they still are going to be able to insert this information if they are doing this by email rather than through text. So don't let that be a barrier because it is still available on on email. It just might be a little bit more work because if I do click to it's going to pull up my documents and the ability to attach something here. So just a little bit more work in terms of getting this information. So just something to keep in mind. If you know that you have a patient population that for some reason has a high amount of individuals that would be getting emails over text messages, you may want to think about changing the way you're asking this question. So rather than it being the capture, like I said, you could always do it just in terms of like a short text, please provide your insurance information, and then have a few additional points of information that you would need from them for that information. Now, really quickly, also one other important thing too, as you're going through this form and making any changes or updates to this, a good thing to always kind of check yourself on. So I don't know, after maybe a couple updates, I would go ahead, you'll see here, you have this save and preview. It is always great to save as much as possible because we would hate for you to be in the middle of creating something, updating something, and something random happens and you didn't get a chance to save what you were working on. So any chance you get, I would go ahead and click that. I'm just going to go down to this question. So when you do save it, you can see that it also says preview. So once I click that, it's actually going to pop open to the form itself, just to give me a quick little preview of what things currently look like. So you can see here, it just popped me to the form. And that was that question that I had saved at. So I'm not going to be able to go any further just because I had saved at this particular point in time. Another great thing, so you can see as I closed out of there, it actually threw me out of the form altogether, which is fine since I already have a bunch of forms saved here. I can just come up, go back to edit, and see that this is what we were working on. One of the other things I'll mention as well, if you do select this information up front prior to the start of the form, when you are previewing it, you actually won't see that piece in the preview. Obviously, when you're previewing, we don't want you to have to upload anything, so it's not included. But as long as this is checked, it's been saved, it will still ask the patient for that information prior to the start of the form. We're just not going to show it to you in the preview. And then if you did want to see it all, the way that it all looks like, you would either go down here to your last question, save and preview it, or you can just go ahead and save. And then you can see the, call it like a little kebab menu over here on the right hand. Let me move that out of the way. Over here on the right hand side, you can edit. So of course, as I had just done, you can go in there and edit the form again, or you can preview it. So again, this is going to pop open into the form itself. And this is going to be from start to finish, being able to actually walk through the entire form. So you'll be able to see exactly how things are asked. If you can remember, the first question was a grouped question. So the patient's seeing all of these questions on one page. They can quickly go through, fill all of this out. The asterisks, that's going to be those required fields. So if that information's not there, as you can see, I'm not able to move on. So once those fields are completed, you can move on. The unfortunate thing about the preview is for those required fields, you still need to put these in to be able to move forward. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're creating these. If you want to leave the required fields off until the very end, so you can quickly preview it and make sure everything looks good. That's an easy way to be able to get through the form quickly to see how the patient would see it without having to put in a ton of information. One last piece here I'll show you, it's going to be that CCDA part. So really the only difference, let's go back to create form. We're going to do the CCDA starter template. We'll use this template. You can see probably the most important piece of this, and really the biggest difference, is making sure that CCDA button for the type of form is selected. So once I use this template, it's automatically selected for me, which is great. The rest of this, in terms of the actual build out, is going to be exactly the same. This is a great template because this is going to show you all of those items that we're able to go ahead and push back over into the EHR. So you've got the medications, the immunization history, the surgical history, family history, social history. All of these different categories are all the different items that we can go ahead and push back. Allergies are even listed in here that we can push back into your EHR. I will say that in terms of like reconciliation, the pieces that you're able to see within the EHR and make updates to does depend on your EHR. So please talk to your customer success manager. They'll be able to let you know the pieces for your EHR that can be reconciled. And as Audrey said, you do need to have a HISP email address, and that's kind of the last piece of this. So once you do have your form created, it is listed as a CCDA form. There's just one last step to really being able to get that sent. Your customer success manager could do this for you, but just in case you were wondering, within your feature settings and in forms, there is a place for you to go ahead and enter that HISP email address. So you would obviously need that to be able to send those CCDA forms back to your EHR. So we would just have this updated. Obviously, make sure this is also enabled as well so that you can send them directly back to the EHR. So those are just a couple of differences, but in terms of the build out itself, they are exactly the same. That is all for me, guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Megan, so much for that. Really great demonstration of how to use our intake forms through pre-scheduling, CCDA, and intake. So again, thank you, Megan. We do have 2 questions from Ben. So Audrey and Megan, I'll just read this out. How do you customize style? Can you add images into the form, i.e. logo, body, maps, etc.?
Yeah, great question. So we can customize the style. So Megan, if you don't mind going back to your mission control, you can show folks how to get into styling and branding. So to get into styling, you'll go into utilities, branding here. You will be able to select a image here. This will be for your logo, and update that image right here. So drag and drop. We do ask you to have at least a high resolution photo of your logo. So I think we have our criteria here. Next, you'll be asked to select a font for your branding here. So over here, we have a number of different selections in terms of font, along with the size for our font. And then finally, in terms of the colors, you can select the colors up here based off of the colors in your color branding. So you can get very specific in terms of the colors here, but we do recommend having 2 to 3 different colors as part of your branding scheme. And then I see that Guadalupe asked a question regarding CCDA. Yes, so at this time, the only type of form that will go back into your EHR is our CCDA form. We do have a number of different EHRs that we can push that form back into, so we're happy to be able to provide you that list. But for most EHRs, we're able to push it back as a PDF. I know that there's one other question. Can we embed this into our websites? So we can embed pre-scheduling forms into our website. So what you would do is you would take that link for pre-scheduling form, and then you can put that directly into the website. So that it says copy URL, and you'll be able to take that link right there and be able to embed it into the website.
Great. I think we just got one more question, Audrey, as well from Ben. Any way to have them added to the waitlist directly? I think that might be going in a different direction here, but if you could answer that, that'd be great.
Yeah, so great question. Not directly from the form. So we can have staff manually add patients to the waitlist. So we could just pop into if we could pop into waitlist, Megan, we can show how we can directly add patients into the waitlist. So not directly from a form, but we can do a staff add to the waitlist. So you'll go into your main menu, waitlist, and then you'll be able to add a patient directly to the waitlist right here. But I'll ask you, prompt you to add in information regarding the patient's first name, last name, date of birth, the provider, the facility, and the appointment type. And then if there is a range in terms of the dates that you'd like to add them to the wait list, you can add them here from the start to end. And even if there's any preferences in terms of days or time of day that the patient would like to be seen, you can add that information as well. Once you're done, you would hit save, and then the patient will be added to the wait list.
Great, thank you, Audrey. Do we have any more questions? I'll give it around 30 seconds. Oh, we've got one from Julie. Julie, okay, we're expanding slowly. Depending on the specific intake form, can you, I think it's coming. A lot of anticipation here.
Julie, if it's easier, I have brought you in so you can ask your question directly. Oh, okay. I guess she doesn't have a mic, but depending on our specific intake form, can we?
In the meantime, if anyone else has got any questions, feel free to put them in the chat.
Okay, great question. So in terms of with the new omni-channel coming out, we'll have more specifics in terms of how patients receive the form. So we'll have more details for you about that shortly. At the moment, I don't have any details in terms of how we can send out forms specifically to a patient. And then can we describe the CCDA more where it ends up? Megan, do you want to take a stab at this?
Yeah, sure. So basically, as I had mentioned, it really comes down to the EHR that you're using. And as I had showed, let me re-share my screen here again. So as I had showed with the CCDA form that we had looked at, so that template, those are going to be the types of information that's going to come over. So again, depending on the EHR, it will come over in a PDF form, as well as in a way that you can actually click into the information and do what we call a reconciliation of it. So with this template, if this was the information that the patient was answering, say medications, you have that information, it comes into the EHR. Again, depending on the EHR, it lands in a different spot. You'd be able to actually see that information for that particular patient and the appointment they have coming up, and you could review it. So you could see that they listed, oh, I take aspirin and I take, spirolactane as my medications. So you can go in there, you can take a look at that. And the reconciliation piece of that is, did they put down the milligrams that they're taking, or do you need to verify that with them? Or do you have any other follow-up questions? You can either say like, yes, this information looks good. And the information that has been provided there will actually be updated within the patient's record. Or if you didn't want to update it just yet, like I said, you still had some questions to ask on the information they input, you could just leave it as is. Once you're able to talk to the patient, then you could actually update it and it would live within that patient's chart. So it's going to be anything in terms of medication, their immunizations, surgical history, family history, they have allergies, and social history. I think that's all of them. Let's see. Yeah, so those are going to be the different types of information that's going to be pushed back.
June, I think if you want to know more information in regards to that, I think reaching out to your customer success manager, and they will definitely help clarify any questions and what reconciliation they have for their specific EHR. Apologies, I'm losing my voice. So yeah, do please reach out to your CSM, and they can help clarify that question. But for now, thank you again to Megan and Audrey for this month's office hours. Oh, we've got one more. Can we convert the intake in a CCDA?
Megan, I think we can duplicate a form, and then we can create, once we duplicate the form, we can create that into a CCDA. Is that correct?
I'm not 100% sure. I believe that the CCDA form has to meet the specific requirements in terms of what is being asked. Typically, you ask a little bit more on those intake forms. So we'll double check on that for you. Let's see who asked that. Okay, so we'll get in touch with your CSM and let them know that you asked that question, just to do a little follow-up for you. But I'm pretty sure it is in terms of the template I was just showing. It's those specific criteria that is going to be what's pushed back.
Great, thanks, Megan. So I think we're going to call that a wrap for this month's office hours, and that's a great lead up for the next upcoming office hours over the next month or two. Please pay a close eye to your emails and make sure to sign up for those. We've got some really interesting subjects coming up and topics. But yeah, thank you, Megan and Audrey. And again, thank you for taking your time out of your day to spend with us and learn more about intake forms. Thank you.